Well, today we are making a little divided tray. It's actually 6 pieces. It's a tray at the bottom and then 4 wedge-shaped bowls that can hold things for the dolls and a center one. Stay tuned and see how fun and easy this project is. All right, we are going to start by constructing our divided portion of our serving platter first, and then when that's done, we're going to do the base platter that it sits in, because depending on the weight of paper you use, how tightly you fold, all those factors could play into this. Yours maybe being a little bit different in size, maybe mine from one time to another could be a different size. So I'm going to give you the measurements as I go, but we are going to do the divided portion first. And that's the harder part, the part that's going to take more time, because there's 5 pieces to the top and only 5 separate dishes on top, and then they all fit into one platter. So we're going to start by making a pattern. So I want you to first find something in your house that's about, let's see, what is the size on this? I measured it yesterday. This container it's like 3 1/4 inches in diameter. This is the container that I recycled into my cornstarch container. It actually was a tub that held dollhouse wallpaper paste. Anything that's round that you can draw around that's 3 to 3 1/2 inches in diameter will be fine. I wouldn't go any bigger than 3 1/2, I don't think. I suppose you could do a 4-inch one, but the measurements for our strips might be off then. So I want you to trace around that, around your container, whatever you've got. If you've got like some kind of device that helps you to draw circles, there's several of them out there, from the old-fashioned ones we used in school, compasses we used in school, to newfangled drawing devices. You could do that. This was at my table, so it was easy. So the first thing, and I'm using this paper, normally I would just pull a piece of paper out of my printer or out of my recycling bin from my printer. I thought for the video, since I'm using white for the pages, I didn't want everything to be white. So this is just a piece of colored printer paper, weight paper. You can use just out of your printer. I just wanted you guys to be able to see what I was doing on the video. Because white on white really makes for a bad video experience, in my opinion. It's been my experience anyway. So we are going to cut this out. Oh, and by the way, I will warn you ahead, they're doing some major construction work in the hallway right outside my apartment, have been for the last 3 days. So if you hear a lot of power tools and banging and stuff in the background, I apologize in advance. I have no control. All right, so our first step is to get the glue off my fingers from working on the prototype. Now I'm going to fold this in half. Make a nice mark in the middle, and then I'm going to fold it the other way. Fold it one direction at a time, because you don't want to be you want your folds to meet in the middle. Now, I like to on the side that I folded this way, so it's a valley fold. Line my ruler up next to that fold. Where's my fold? There it is. The way the light's hitting, it's really hard for me to see my fold right now. There we go. Now, I have a circle template. You need something that's 1 inch in diameter. I like this, and they come in many different versions. I used to have one I really liked, and I lost it when I moved. I think it was in that box. It wouldn't fit in the truck. Because I like this because it has the markings, so I can center it. What we need is a 1 inch circle in the middle of our template. There. So we've got a mine's 3 1/4, and then a 1 inch circle that's fairly well centered. Now, I'm going to cut up. I'm going to cut around. I'm going to cut all the way around my center circle. And if your center's off just a tiny bit, it's okay as long as it's not too far off. I saw that on doing this on camera, I got my lines a little bit off, so mine's not perfectly centered, but that's okay. It won't matter in the long run. Now, got the little 1-inch circle, and then you need one of these quarters. You don't need all of them. We only need one because we're going to make a pattern from this. Now I have this piece of watercolor paper on my table. It's 140-pound watercolor paper. I used it in our project when we made the bento lunchbox the other day. And it's just a really convenient heavy weight paper, and I've got it. If you don't have this, use poster board. Use, like the poster board that you can even get at Dollar Tree. Use an index card. Anything that's got a little bit of stiffness to it, a little bit of weight, so that it won't go floppy. Because what we are doing is we're creating a pattern. We need a pattern so that we can neatly cut out our pieces and have them be consistent. That's the secret to doing these little paper projects. They look really simple, but being accurate and consistent is what makes them simple. So I'm going to let this glue dry for just a little bit. When it gets dry, I'll come back and we'll cut these out and we'll start marking and cutting our pieces for our box. All right, my glue is set up a little bit, so I'm just going to cut out kind of close to this first. Now, be prepared. This paper, if you use this 140-pound watercolor paper, it is really thick, and so you do need to be patient when you're cutting. I've seen these little divided trays used for vegetable platters. I've seen them used for serving different dishes. Like, I used to have a Chinese cookbook that had a picture of a buffet in the photos, and they used one too, but it was really highly decorated. I decided for this one I'm going to just make mine white today, so it'll go with everything. So we're going to start by tracing and marking our pieces for our dish that we're using our pattern for. So I find it works kind of nice to just use some of these edges that the paper has, and I'm going to trace. We're going to need 8 of these. And I'm not going to cut these yet because we're not working on the center until we get all of our wedges finished. Then we'll work on our center. So let me trace off 8 of these off camera. And when I get them all done, and I get them all cut out, I'll come back and we'll cut the strips that will form the sides. All right, using another piece of the same cardstock, I recommend doing the same color. We are going to cut 4 2-inch wide strips, the width of the paper, in this case 8.5 inches. And we'll use most of that. I've already cut 2 off camera, simply to make this a little faster. And save this because you'll need this for the strip for around the round part in the center. So now we've got 2 inches. We are going to score on both long edges. We're going to go in 1/2 inch from one side. I'm only going to do one of these on camera, and then I will turn the camera off, get the rest of them scored, and get my tray back so we can start gluing. And then 3/4 of an inch from the other side. So I'm going to score all 4 pieces, and when I get that done, I'll come back and we'll glue these and get them prepped to put onto our serving piece. All right, these are all cut and scored, so now we are going to fold them on our score lines. And this one, I had a little problem with my knife. I got caught on something on my cutting surface. Not a problem. That will be hidden when we get all done. I just made sure to score this at the 1/2 inch with the 1/2 inch piece side instead of the other side. Now, we are going to make one little notch on the 3/4 inch side. And it doesn't matter which end. I've done both ends. For me anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm going to cut it full at that score mark, and then probably about a 1/2 inch in. It doesn't have to be measured. This is our overlap piece. This will help us to make the seam where, at a corner where our our piece meets itself on a corner. Just make sure you cut on the 3/4 inch piece that's scored at 3/4 inch, not the other side. All right, now, so that's all done. Now, we are going to take some glue. Actually, I'm going to use glue stick for this one, because this is going to not really matter. We'll have to use our liquid glue for the next step. Now, that 3/4 inch strip that we just notched, apply some glue to it. And rub it down. That's going to be our side of our serving tray. Make sure it's folding on the score line. If you scored a little crooked, you might need to kind of force it to fold. And that one I got a little off, but that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and glue the rest of these. When they're glued and the glue is dried a bit, I'll come back, we'll get the edges notched, and we'll get ready to start gluing. All right, once the glue dries on your pieces of your strips that you've glued, where you have that notch, and hopefully the camera's picking that up. Now we will probably have to, we're going to do more trimming later, and if you've got a piece that's kind of sticking up on the top, just trim that off. Get all nice and level. And then from this notch on, the whole length, we're going to make little tiny notches because we want this to go around the bend on our little dishes. So I am going to, rather than have you sit here and watch me cut all these little notches, I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to get them cut off camera. I do recommend that you just set this over your trash can to do this. It's much easier for cleanup. So I'm going to notch all the rest of this, all 4 strips, and then I'll be back and we can start gluing. All right, now that all of these are cut, I'm going to move all but one off to the side and all of these except one. I'm going to do one at a time on the video. I'll do the other 3 off camera. So I want you to kind of fold this so that it gets out of our way. Start so that this is on the curve and you can glue to this side. Now I try to keep, let's go this way, my pencil lines to the inside on this, to the bottom on this piece, and then when I glue a bottom one on, I'll put the pencil lines to the top. So we are going to glue this so that this edge is snugged right up against where that's folded, and so that this corner is right here. Now you notice I did take a notch right at that corner so that that will fold around. Now for this we will need our liquid glue because we need the sticking power that our liquid glue has. Some glue there. Keep it nice and straight. And try not to let the next one that's going to go around the corner get glued down. Now for this first section, I actually like to leave it flat, and this I would like to have, if not completely dry, at least about 75% dry so that it won't move on me when I go to the next step. So I'm going to let this dry. When it's dry, we'll come and go around the corner and get started making this look like a little dish. All right, my glue is set up. Now the first thing I'm going to do is look and see, make sure I got that free. Now this little point here is kind of sticky. I've got glue all over my fingers. If you've got any points sticking out, go ahead and trim them off. Now, what I like to do is go in here, and where the paper lines up, where the curve of the paper lines up, I'm going to first fold away and then towards, so I want to get a corner there. Now, I need to do some trimming on this little point because this little point's not perfectly in the right spot, and that's okay. I'm just going to trim it back without cutting my base. There. Now, I'm going to fold up. I'm going to go like this. And if these don't hug the corner perfectly, that's okay. If your paper's a little heavier, they might not. I'm going to go ahead and get some glue here. And it's okay if this part isn't perfectly neat because this is never going to show. We're going to put that's why we cut 8 of those pieces instead of 4, because we're going to put 1 on the bottom. So kind of hold that there a little bit and get that part to stick. I'm going to do the other 3. When this glue is set up enough that it won't go anywhere, I'll come back and we'll go down the next side. All right, now that that glue is dry, we're going to line up with the corner and kind of make a fold. I like to fold back first and then fold the way I want it to go. It's just easier to fold that direction first. Now I'm going to line it up and I'm going to see, I don't want this piece to be glued down because it straddles the edge. And yeah, the rest of them are fine. If you've got any pieces that didn't glue down earlier, go ahead and just slip some glue under them. On the corners, you might have a few pieces that you have to go back and glue, and you might have to trim some. All right. Make sure that this is nice and firm against that edge, and if you've got some of these small clamps like I've got from the Dollar Tree, go ahead and clamp this. That will make it a little easier. You don't have to sit and hold it so long. This piece doesn't have any glue under it, so I need to put glue there. And like I said earlier, this is not going to show. Once we're done with this step going all the way around, we're going to put the extra piece on that we cut, so it will be covered up. So I'm going to do the other 3, and when they're all done and dry, we can go around the last side. All right, that glue is dried now, or mostly dry. So now I'm going to again bend my corner away and then toward where I want it to go. And now this one, I never get it exactly trimmed where I'd like it. I'm sure eventually I will. I'm going to trim, I'm going to fold this around, and where this comes out, I'm going to cut just past that point. If I can get it cut a little bit. I am so full of glue today. Now, sometimes you're going to need to do some trimming on these pieces. This one I don't need to, but I've had a couple where I had to split those little tabs. That's okay. If they aren't laying flat, just split them so that they will. Okay. Now it's too long, so let's go ahead and got glue all over myself. All right, let's cut off just a little more. There. Now it's going to be right. If all of these tabs don't glue down the first time around, it's all right. We can go back once this part gets dried. Now, line up your corner so that it's the same height. Do your best to get your ends down. Set it down on your work tray. Make sure your work tray is something that won't hurt, glue won't hurt it. And clamp where those 2 edges overlap and set it off to dry. Once this is dry, we can go back and fix the bottom side a little better. So when this dries, I'll be back and we'll fix those bottom tabs. All right, my glue is set up enough that we can move on. And I did figure out, by the way, that my little paint jars that I had sitting over on the side of my table for another project fit in these really nicely. Because without it, they tip. So, I'm not going to worry about trimming anything right now. I'm going to take my glue and just put a thin amount over most of the bottom. Take one of my other, remember we used 4 of the 8, so we've got 4 of these left. Put this on here, kind of center it up as best I can, and then I'm going to set it off to the side to dry with the little paint jar in it. And when those are dry, we'll come back and we will look at how these look, see if they need any trimming, and move on to our little central bowl. All right, while our little divided bowls get dried, I am going to work on our center bowl. And what I've done is I've cut another strip, a 2-inch strip, just like I did for the bowls, and I'm going to cut off a chunk at the end so that we can overlap. And I've scored it at 3/4 of an inch from one side, 1/2 inch from the other side, folded it, and we're going to glue the 3/4 inch, the 2 pieces that are 3/4 of an inch, because this side and the center are both 3/4 of an inch, so we're going to glue that together to form our wall. And then when this glue is set up enough that it stays together, I'm going to start cutting notches in the 1/2 inch flap. And when that's all done, I'll come back and we'll start assembling our little bowl. All right, now that the glue is set, just like with the other strips, we are going to start cutting notches. And I'm going to do most of this off camera so you don't have to watch it, and so I can hold it over my trash can so I don't make quite as much of a mess. Once I get all these notches cut, I will be back and we will start gluing our sides onto our dish. All right, now that this is all notched, I kind of used my fingers and kind of pre-curled this just a little bit because I wanted to have a curve. And it's going to be easier if you have something round that's about 1 inch in diameter. My glue stick happens to be just about the right size, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to put some glue, and I've got the side with the pencil lines on it up here. It's the side I want to glue to. And I don't want to glue that flap yet. And this is one of those little jobs that feels like you need about 4 hands. I am attempting to stay under camera and do this at the same time. We'll come back under camera, don't worry. I had to reach around. Okay, let's go ahead and get some glue on the back side of this. You want to be careful that you don't glue this to your whatever you're using for a form, like in my case the glue stick, but that you have this on here tight enough that you can keep it round. And then I'm going to cut some notches. I should have thought of this earlier. Get my little pieces down. Because I put that on the flat on the other piece, I didn't need to cut notches. I didn't think of that. Here, pull some of those out. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do this all in one step. Glue under and on top of those last flaps. Put this with the pencil line up. And stand it up on its top. Now that glue needs to dry, and when that's dry we can take all of these, get all these out and start putting some Mod Podge on them and measure to see how big our bottom tray will be. So I'll be back when these dry. All right, now that my glue is pretty well dried, I'm pulling all the paint jars off of these, pulling off the clips. And the first thing we're going to do is get a small pair of scissors and any trimming that needs to be done. Because these are paper, they're not going to be perfect. And as normal, I have a piece of hair glued into it. I'm going to go around and make sure everything is trimmed. And let's see. So I'll do that part off camera. Let's go ahead and put these together. We're going to go like this. They're not going to fit perfectly, but they'll be fine. So let's kind of bend this. You can kind of use your thumb to kind of make that curve come back. And you want to do that before you Mod Podge it. All right, now I want to get my ruler, which I love how I have like 3 rulers on my table and I can never find any of them. All right, so this looks like it's about 4 inches in diameter finished. So it's grown somewhat, it's grown about 3/4 of an inch from what it was. So I'm going to make a note of that off to the side on a piece of scrap paper, and I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to finish trimming this, then I'm going to give it a good even coat of Mod Podge. I'm going to start on the outsides, turn them upside down on my tray to the side, let that dry, and when that's dry we'll turn them over and do the insides. While this is drying, I am going to locate something that is 4 inches in diameter to use as my pattern for the base of the tray. And when I find that, I'll be back and we can start working on that tray that holds this all together. All right, I found this lid to a coffee can that's 4 inches in diameter, about. So since a 4-inch circle's circumference is bigger than my other ruler, it's also bigger than my piece of paper would handle. It's going to be about 12.5 inches. I found a piece of 12 by 12 white paper that I'm going to use as my side band for my my platter. And I've got my long ruler out. And I'm going diagonally. I lined up my 3/4 inch line from the opposite corners, and I cut diagonally, and then I'm going to flip this around, and I'm going to make a 1.5 inch strip that is now, what is the measurement of this? Oh, let's see, from the flat edge to the flat edge is about almost 16 inches. So that will be sufficient, and we only need 1.5 inches because we're making this a narrower piece than the sides on our little dishes. And you could use a contrasting color for this. You don't have to use the same color. All right, let's put the tray back up here. So I've got, actually no, let's go ahead and score this while I've got this out. So on this one, I want to score a 1/2 inch from each side. Trying to do this without getting my head under the camera today. I keep knocking things down. inch around, another 1/2 inch. And when you go to fold this, if you find it's folding past the center, just trim off a little bit. It's okay if you're a little off. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so we have that. Now, and that ruler I was using is just another quilting ruler that's 6 inches wide by 24 inches long. I don't break it out very often because it's so big to use. All right, now this time we're going to do it a little differently. We aren't going to make a pattern, but we are going to use our watercolor paper. I'm going to use the watercolor paper as I'm going to trace around this on here. And I'm also going to trace around onto some of my white paper. I might as well use these. I'm going to trace one layer this size. And then we're going to cut our second layer out after we get this done. We're actually going to be making a second strip as a trim strip to go around, and that will probably be a color. I haven't decided what I'm going to do for a trim strip. I'm going to make the bottom look a little more finished on this than it does on the little bowls inside, because this is going to show more. So there's that. And I'm going to cut this out. Remember, this watercolor paper is going to be a little stiffer, be a little harder to cut out. It still cuts just fine, and it will make a much sturdier bottom, especially since this is bigger. Once again, we are going to fold up on our score lines. And I'm probably going to trim just a hair off of there just to make sure that it folds up nicely. Not much, you don't want to lose a lot, but you can trim off just a hair, just a really thin strip off there. This is going to be on the inside, so it won't really show. Oops, going crooked. Trying to keep this under the camera, I'm managing to cut off a little bit more than I intended to. All right, now that piece that I just trimmed off, I'm going to cut one end of this just like we did before. And a little bit more. Let's cut that up like that. And I'm going to glue this down. Then I'm going to go ahead and glue these two pieces together. Try to make sure that you've got the pencil line from your white circle towards that watercolor paper. So I'll make sure that stays down. Once this is set up enough that it won't come apart, I'm going to cut notches along this loose flap. When that's done, I will come back and we can start putting our tray together. All right, I've got the notches all cut. Now remember, we want to leave this flap free. And be sure that you are putting this on the side that is the watercolor paper. It's a little more texture to it, and it's not quite white, at least the one I've got isn't. So I'm not going to do the whole thing on camera because that's going to take a while, but what I'm going to do, just like we did before, put some glue down and get your notches, your notched edge into it. Snug this right up to the edge of the paper, of the bottom, and we're going to have a nice little rim going all the way around. All right, so I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to go actually turn on something on YouTube and watch a video, watch a mindless video, and work my way around. When I get to the end, just like I did with the other pieces, I'm going to trim this, I'm going to glue the flap over it, and when that glue is all dry, I'll come back and we'll move on to finishing the bottom of this and maybe putting some trim on the side of it. So I'll be back in a second. All right, this is what this looks like so far. So now I'm working on multiple projects, so I have to figure out where I put things. I'm going to put some glue on here. And we're actually going to trim the paper, the base off after we get this glued, after the glue dries. I do want to spread this out though. I want a nice thin layer of glue. And I don't know if I've mentioned, as usual, I'm using a nice thick tacky glue. A little bit more in there. This is quite a large surface. I'm not used to working on anything this large. And you want to make sure you have it all the way to the edges if possible. Although we can come in and do a little touch-up gluing. Here's our triangle of paper. Make sure you've got paper sticking past all the edges. And I'm just going to grab a bunch of bottles of stuff that I've got on my table and weight that down because that will help that to stick. It will also help it to get flattened out when that dries. I'll come back, we'll trim it back, and we'll decide what our next step is. All right, now we're going to cut this off and be really careful and just line your scissors up as close as you can. And I'm kind of angling my scissors at an angle with the bottom blade under and the top blade kind of out, so it's not, so that my bottom piece doesn't show as much, hopefully. It just kind of bevels the paper edge a little bit. It helps things to hide. All right, and that looks really nice. Let's get a look at the side of it. That looks so nice. Now I decided, this has been drying overnight, and in the middle of the night I decided I want to add a little bling to this outer tray. Oh, first let's see how these fit. I haven't gotten to do this because these were wet last night. So these are going to fit like that, but they're kind of plain. So I want to add a little bling to this piece. I have some of this, what's it called? Folk Art brushed metal in brushed gold, and I love this paint. It's become my favorite gold metallic paint. I've got a silver one too, and for metallic paint these are my favorite. I've got a flat, rather flat brush. I'm just going to just kind of scrape the flat brush along this top edge. And that will add just this kind of pretty, kind of irregular looking gold band, which you see on real dinnerware. Not enough right there. You will need to refill your brush quite often because you want to have it be noticeable. But it's just that little detail that's going to add a little something to this piece. It doesn't take much paint. It won't take long to dry. And it's just going to make this look just a little more special and make this bottom piece stand out from our little dish inserts. So I'm going to finish going all the way around. I'm going to let this dry, and when this is completely dry, I'll come back, we'll put a coat of Mod Podge on it, and then we can, when it dries again, we can see how it looks. All right, this little bit of gold paint is now dried. That just really literally takes moments. I'm going to do the outside first. Off camera, I'll go ahead and do the inside also when the Mod Podge is dry. This is, again, the gloss Mod Podge. When all the Mod Podge is dry, we'll take a look at our finished little serving platter. So I'll be right back with it done. All right, the Mod Podge is all dry. I love how this looks. It's going to be absolutely adorable and really cool once we fill it. So now my bottom is warping just a little bit, not unusual when you're using pieces of paper this big. If it continues, just put something heavy in it for a few days. It should weight it down. And once you put stuff in it, it won't do that anymore. So let's look at this all put together. So what do you think we should put in here? What should we make to put in here the first time? Let me know in the comments, and be sure and check the blog post for photos and my thoughts, a little more detail about what I did, why I did it. Those things are always in the blog post, which is always linked in the description box of each video. There's a link for the blog post for that video. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, leave me a like, leave me a comment. If you enjoy my content and haven't subscribed to my channel, I encourage you, hit that subscription button and the notification bell so you know when I put up a new video, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.